Welcome back, everybody. I need help, so I got myself a counselor, and she's here to help me to understand Dust of Dreams. Welcome back, Counselor of Moonspawn.
Hi, guys. Great to be back with Raf and discuss some more Dust of Dreams.
Yeah, like a while ago, we discussed the first half, books 1 and 2, and I'll link it below on Counselor's channel. So we're going to talk about books 3 and 4 today. It's going to be a bit darker, I guess. And yeah, it's going to be like full spoilers up to the end of Dust of Dreams, I think. And I guess we'll try to avoid anything that goes beyond that spoiler-wise, I guess, sort of. We'll see. Anyway, I finished it like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. You finished it a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago.
Yeah.
So what were your like overall thoughts after finishing Dust of Dreams for the second time, I think? Also, yeah, beer. Cheers. Cheers. So what were your final thoughts like overall after finishing it for the second time?
So I have to admit, Dust of Dreams was my least favorite the first time, and I think it has remained my least favorite of the 10 books. Now, please note that least favorite among Malazan doesn't mean it sucks. It's still good, but I just didn't really like it quite as much as some of the other books. And I've been talking about that a little in the first collab. I just feel like it's incredibly slow. Maybe that's also because it's technically part one of like one giant novel.
Yeah.
And it takes such a long time until all of the pieces get moving and the Malazans get out of Letheras. And then you have the Vargas and the snake running around. You have the Sheikh trying to get back to Kurat Galain. It's all a very, very slow movement of big groups of people. And I feel like the last, I don't know, maybe 200 pages or so definitely got a lot more intense. You know, when the whole big battle happens with the Naruk and everything, and with the Sheikh finally exploring Kakanas, that got definitely more interesting. But I also have to say, Dust of Dreams is one of the books where I found it a little harder to care for the characters. I mean, the thing with Erikson is I often felt like it sometimes takes me a while to really enjoy characters. You know, you get to know new characters and you're like, oh, another new character. I want to go back to my old guys, basically. And then after a while, you realize, okay, I actually do like that character. But Dust of Dreams like introduces you to a lot of new characters again, and
a lot of them are very unlikable.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, looking at the Vargas storyline, obviously. So
yeah, that's true. So maybe let's start discussing the Vargas storyline as a whole, and then look at like some of the intense parts of that. Like, what were your thoughts of the Vargas storyline overall? Because for me, it always feels a bit like, at least the first time I read it, it felt very unsatisfying because it basically goes nowhere. And you're like, why is all this suffering happening? And at the end, they're all dead.
Yeah.
how did that actually...
right, I felt the same.
It's like, how did that help the novel? Why was that whole part necessary?
Yeah, well, I think it was necessary in the sense that it told you a lot about a group of people, and that, of course, I mean, with Erikson, he always wants to tell you something by including a certain storyline. He wants you to consider things about our real world again, and I feel like that was probably the purpose of the Vargas storyline. And I mean, technically, there are different storylines as well that don't really go anywhere, or you could say they don't really play a big role when it comes to the you know, the big climax at the end of Crippled God, but they have like a smaller meaning. And yeah, what do I think of the Vargas storyline? Well, it's definitely really jarring to read. It's really brutal. And I think it was interesting how relentless the portrayal of that Vargas society is. Because I think Rafi said it before in the first collab, is that they're a society of warriors, and when there's no war, their society basically can't function, or they cannot function in peace.
Yeah.
And yeah, the aggressiveness and the way that they are willing to treat each other is so horrible. And
yeah, that's true. I mean, that's I guess one of the things that made it so uncomfortable for me to read, apart from like the actual act of the hobbling itself, but you can just like feel, like viscerally feel that pressure within that society, within the Vargas
yes,
building up. That's not a comfortable feeling. It's like, like, they need a fight, because otherwise they're gonna, tear themselves apart, which is kind of what happens.
yeah, it's kind of like, you really feel like, imagine if you were walking through their tents.
Yeah.
At every second you have to expect somebody to jump at you and kill you just because.
Yeah.
And that is scary.
Yeah, I feel that's certainly one of the bits in there. I guess the other part is one about adapting. I feel like a large thing, like one of the themes I found, like at least this time around reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen in general, is very much about adapting to changing circumstances, to be able to change, to question one's identity, one's traditions, one's beliefs under, like, when new information comes in or whatever, and to adapt to changing circumstances. And the Vargas are certainly one of the groups where, for a lot of different reasons, I feel that doesn't happen. You have like a few people in there that understand the change is necessary. Kafal is certainly one of them. Maybe Hetan, kind of difficult to say with her. Humbral Tar showed that already when he spoke with, like, all the way back in Memories of Ice, when he talks with Captain Sergeant whatever Parana at the point, Captain Ganos, and
Probably, yeah.
yeah, when they're talking in the tent after the, or before, no, after the duel with Trots and his son, and they sit in that tent and talk about the Vargas gods and all that stuff. And so there's a few people within Vargas society that understand it, and there's like a point in the Crippled God where that comes up again. But so there's a few people within that society that understand that their, like, traditional way of life is not tenable and needs to change over time, and want to change. There's even, that point where Kafal and a few others talk about the fact that they wanted to abolish, for example, the tradition of hobbling, but kind of couldn't actually persevere against other forces within the society. And I feel that's one of those interesting points where you look at how societies sometimes are too entrenched in their traditions because they're beleaguered from the outside already, to actually change their ways into something better. And I feel that's where we come back to what you said before. It's like that it's something we should consider, because it's a point about us as non-Malazan citizens, so to speak. And that is exactly that point. It's like, because we live in societies that also sometimes struggle with changing. It's like, for us Germans, it's, for example, the idea that sometimes technology that doesn't run on diesel might just actually be a good idea. And there's a lot of people who don't understand that. And so he takes obviously a very drastic example for that, with the hobbling and all the other stuff that's happening with the Vargas, but it's not limited to so-called barbarian societies somewhere in the margins of the world. It's something that can happen to each and every society. And the idea is to be aware of that. And
I've just been thinking about, like, tradition in general, because, like, I feel like tradition often, or it isn't necessarily something that's useful or something that you have to do, but you just somehow stick to it because that's the way we've always done it. But I mean, I'm wondering just now, does there always have to be a reason why a certain tradition originated? Probably. Or can you always find a root for a tradition? And if so, what is the, like, I mean, the hobbling is something that is not constructive. It is definitely, or it doesn't seem constructive to us, because at least to the one person that is hobbled, it is incredibly destructive. And it also tells you a lot about a society that is willing to destroy somebody so completely. But then again, the complete and utter destruction of a person is something that our society does too. I mean, it's not as physically obvious as in the case of the hobbling, but that doesn't mean that we are necessarily above doing horrible things to others. And I think that is maybe also one of the lessons that the hobbling can teach us. Like, are we really better than the Vargas in what we do?
Yeah, I feel that's like the point. Like, there's like two. I feel there's like kind of two sides to two sides, but two different aspects that pertain to that. Like, on the one hand, yes, you have that idea that like the total destruction of a person is something that is necessary. It kind of goes down to that whole idea that sometimes a society needs some kind of scapegoat, in a way. That you that where you have like a sort of collective guilt that is felt by a society, or collective pressure, and you need a specific figure to take on all of that. And yeah, you obviously have the tradition of the actual scapegoat that takes on all the sins and is like chased into the desert. And I recently found out that there's actually something similar in Sumerian mythology, but like switched around, but that's not exactly important right now. But the point is, so you have that sometimes an individual takes on all of that, and that's something that is just like in like group dynamics everywhere. That's not just, you know, society. That can be within a group of friends, even like a small group of friends, a sports team, a rock band, or whatever. Like, you have a group of people within that group dynamic. Sometimes you have like certain pressure builds up, and then there's like one person on whom all that will, like, you know, fall, on whose head that all of that will fall. And then it just comes to what are the socially acceptable methods of like punishment, in a way. And they are certainly in our world more on the virtual and image and so for the public image side of things, and less on the like very physical punishment. You look a couple of centuries back, you have the idea of the pillory, right? Which is kind of physical, you know, when you have to put someone in the pillory in the market square and everyone can just like throw shit at them, whatnot, which is still a way off that, like the sexual component of the hobbling, but not that far away from it. So it kind of depends on the society. And as we've seen before, the Vargas are a very physical society. It's like, you know, they're warrior society, but like also a very brutal warrior society. Like challenges are like fought in duels to the death, not just like in ritual, you know, combat or whatever, where you have all kinds of societies. When they progress, in a way, progress is obviously a stupid word there, but over time, a lot of societies find ways to take these violent, brutal ways of challenge and so forth, and channel them into something more ritualistic and so forth, to avoid losing so many people, right? Because it's in the end, who's losing there is the Vargas, because they kill a lot of their own. But that's just like changing or evolving the way, like the method of the punishment. But the idea is still the same. It's like you have all that pent up pressure within a specific group through group dynamics, and one person gets all of that when it boils over, and then you take the appropriate thing there to just like alleviate all that pressure.
And I feel like another point when we're talking about group dynamics is power, or how power can fuse people together as a group. Because I feel like there is definitely a tendency when a group of people see, okay, this person is the weak one, we can all jump at that person. Obviously, there is going to be somebody who is in charge who's going to say, okay, Hitan is going to be hobbled now. But there are certainly also other people who are on the weaker side. And now, when all of the pent up rage and heart rate and whatnot, when it all gets focused onto one person, then that allows the weaker people to hide, because then they don't appear as weak anymore, because they are not at the bottom of the food chain anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like that encourages people to just simply go with it, because if they would say, hey, no, I do not stand behind that, if they would put themselves onto the side of the weak, or onto the side of the victim, then they would become victims themselves, but they cannot risk that. And yeah, I feel like that's definitely very very noticeable in that case.
Yeah, there's two things there. Right? There's like, on the one hand, you have the discussion that Bakal has later on with the widow of his wife's lover, whom quick thing on the side. Did you ever notice that like everyone in the Malazan Book of the Fallen always is like married immediately? Like you have all these people and they're lovers, but they always call each other husband and wives. Like, when did Withal and Sanderlaf marry?
Yeah.
when did Kalam and Manala marry? Why is that always husband and wife? Like
it's spiritual. I don't know.
I don't know. It's something that I realized this time around. It's like so many people are suddenly married. But anyway, not the point. When Bakal is talking to her about that, you have that there. And directly during the act of the hobbling, like almost immediately after the attack, we changed like the point of view to the women that were like the chief actors in the hobbling. Like, you know, her old nursemaid, I think nursemaid, like some servant of hers, and that other like very frustrated woman and so forth. And you realize that it's very much that that penned up once again penned up pressure and rage of that a very strict hierarchy has, right? That's something you have in hierarchy in general, right? You have these ideas like, as long as you're at the bottom of the food chain, as soon and get, you know, trampled by those above you in that hierarchy, as soon as you're no longer the lowest, you're gonna just take all that resentment that you picked up through the years of like punishment and denigration and whatnot, and you take all of that and you just push all of that down on the person below you, which just perpetuates that kind of structure, that power structure.
Yeah, I feel like maybe a little bit of a parallel here is, imagine if something comes out about a celebrity. Celebrity has done something wrong. Yeah. How quick people are to attack that celebrity then, how quickly a celebrity can become a target for a person's hate. And maybe, I mean, Hitan being the wife of the war leader of the Vargas, she's probably kind of the equivalent of a celebrity in the Vargas society. So again, another interesting parallel here. And it's definitely interesting how much of the hatred of the women seemed to become obvious in what they were doing. And what I found especially gruesome is that it's actually a child that is involved in the hobbling directly.
Yeah.
And like, what? I mean, it's basically a little girl, and she, I think we get her point of view. I think we did, right?
We do get her point of view, but she's not actually, she just got told to do it, so she does it because she's in the power of one of the older women. So she doesn't have like any actual grievance, but you have a lot of like envy that is like turns into hatred. And I guess that's sort of what is at the root of all these things when you have like the whole mob descending on any kind of celebrity as well, because like we envy those people because they have more than we have, which
and then suddenly we or they are the ones in power, and that is super exhilarating. And then they kind of fuse into that group that has the power, and they collectively jump on that person, and they just follow along, and nobody does anything.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of the points. Like you have suddenly the powerless feel like they are in power, and they use that. That's like the one side. The other side I found really interesting is, as I said, that conversation with Bakal and that woman whose name I have forgotten because I suck at names.
I don't remember either.
When he talks to her about why the hobbling is done by women to a woman, why they do that, and she says that as long as there is a hobbled woman where men can take all their frustrations out on whom men can take their frustrations out, we as women who are, because the Vargas once again are a very physical and violent society, there's a lot of domestic violence in there. And it's like, as long as they can just take all their frustrations out on her, the rest of the women have some kind of peace. So it's very much like this idea of throwing someone else to the wolves and in order to gain peace for a while, which hints at a deeper, well, hints is the wrong word for that. It shows there's a deeper underlying problem there in that society.
And I feel like the interesting thing here is that the Vargas to women are quite violent themselves. I mean, that's pretty obvious. For example, in Memories of Ice, when it said that they basically dragged all of the Malazans into their tents, or if you look at Hitan in Memories of Ice, I mean, she's definitely very, she is not scared to take a man for herself if she wants him. And I've not just been thinking, can a man be hobbled as well and then basically become prey for the women? Is that a thing?
Within the Vargas society, apparently not. And that's like, okay, there's like two things. Like, I guess the closest you come to that is in Memories of Ice, the idea of the women of the Dead Sea, in a way. But that's an interesting thing, because like when it comes to like very traditional gender roles, the Vargas are pretty advanced, where you have a lot of female warriors. You have Hetan, you have you have the skin cuts with Relata and this other group. So the idea of a warrior's life is open to women as well as to men, but apparently on the domestic side of things, once they decide to actually get into like a marriage, for whatever that means in Vargas circles, suddenly they're once again, like, because they are, I guess it's because they are such a physical, in a way, raw society. I feel that's sort of the interesting thing there, like a very raw societies, like everything is very direct. Like when you look at our society, like power dynamics are often hidden behind a lot of like all kinds of veils and so forth. You still have a power dynamic in every kind of relationship. That's just like how things work. But with the Vargas, those power dynamics are always in the open, right? It's not like I guess the closest to a non-violent power dynamic that you have is with Sikara and Stolman. But apart from that, it's like it's all like very direct, very physical. It's who knocks out whom first is basically in charge. And I guess which is kind of interesting there, because it kind of contrasts with that idea of like a rather like more open society that the Vargas have, on the other hand, when it comes to like gender roles.
Yeah, but because you just mentioned Sikara, and the more domestic side of society, there it seemed like the women definitely have some power. And now I've just been thinking, I mean, the consequences of the hobbling are more on the domestic side of society as well. I mean, it's not an act of war. It's not something that happens in a battle, and it doesn't really have an influence on future battles. It's something that happens in the camp, and it influences the life of people, like when they're not currently fighting in a battle. So I feel like that is the area in which the women tend to have power as well. And again, that's interesting if you consider that it's the women who are performing the hobbling, because technically they are performing an act that is within their domain, within society, if you see it like that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's like the interesting thing. Like, as soon as you hobble someone like Hetan, who is technically a warrior, you take away that role from her, right? I mean, you take away all the other roles from her as well. You just make her an object. You just objectify her. But it's very important that once that happens, she is reduced to her, to her gender, basically, which, you know, strips away all these other things, which shows that there is at least this underlying idea of this gender difference between men and women. Because I don't think men get hobbled, they just get killed, I guess.
But honestly, it didn't, at least to me, it didn't really feel like she was reduced to her gender. It more felt like she was reduced to an object. When she was hobbled, she ceased to be a person. And I mean, an object doesn't have a gender. She's just a thing to be used then.
She's
or at least that's how it felt to me.
I agree with that. I just meant that before that, because like she's certainly objectified and made into an object at that point, but she can be made into that object before because she is a woman. That's sort of my point. About at the point where she is hobbled, she's just an object at that point.
Whew. Heavy stuff.
It's no fun. But let's have a talk about Zikara and Maralab and his brothers, and that part of the Vargas. Because there's something that I found interesting. That's both Zikara is very much into collecting power and symbols of power, like wealth and all of that. And there's this one scene later on where Maralab's brothers, it's the point of view of one of Maralab's brothers, and I have no idea what's his name because he died shortly after. And he's thinking about, like, once they defeat all the other I keep forgetting the tribe they're fighting. That's the gang of Scepter Icolus, those people.
Akrinai.
They're the Akrinai, not the Safi. The Akrinai. Once they defeat the Akrinai, they want to build themselves castles and be landlords and so forth. What I find interesting here is that basically Zikara and Maralab and his brothers think in a more civilized way than the Vargas. And that makes them way more disgusting than anyone else in that crew. That's something that I found interesting, that like they have an edge on other Vargas because they are able to manipulate them in a different way, because they are already thinking in a more capitalist, or whatever you want to call it, advanced, more civilized way. But for reasons that we might be like personal or societal, they certainly err on the darkest possible side of civilization there.
Yeah, I mean, Zikara definitely felt like a character you might find in a court intrigue, because her way of gaining power is not physical. She gains power by influencing people and doing intrigue and stuff. And again, is it kind of symbolic that, I mean, you said that Hitan is a warrior, and then when she's hobbled, she's no longer a warrior. But I mean, Sikara was kind of like hanging around in the background behind all of those events, and she has kind of, she's beyond that stage of the warrior. As you said, she seems like she has walked further down that path of civilization.
Yeah.
And then Hitan actually loses her status as a warrior, but she doesn't advance. So I don't know if I'm making sense, or I don't know, again, maybe this also relates to what I've been saying before, that it's not, the hobbling is not in the warrior domain, but in the more domestic domain that might maybe also seem more civilized than the warrior side of the Vargas.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was making sense, but
no, that kind of makes sense. The other thing, though, is that when you look at what Sikara does, Sikara, because she's more advanced on the path to civilization and that dark path to civilization, or the dark side of civilization, she basically objectifies everyone, right? Like, to her, everyone around her is just a tool that she can use for her further advancement, whether it's her husband Stolman or Maraleb and his brothers, and like she just like uses everyone like pieces, which is sort of what happens in either a feudal society or nowadays in like corporations within capitalism. Like, you're just expendable like pieces. Your material that can be shoved around and so forth. And that's how she thinks and works, which is super fascinating, because on the one hand, when we live our daily lives, we totally accept that, and when we read it in books, it comes across as like super abhorrent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found that interesting. The other thing is, though, that she's like in that role, but she's also already pretty delusional, and I guess that's the other side of that comes through all over the Malazan book, and especially in Dust of Dreams and later on in the Crippled God as well. This idea that people that think like that and use their underlings or like people at their disposal like objects, and just use them up and as disposable material, basically lose touch with reality in a way. And you can see that certainly happening with Sikara near the end of the Vargas storyline, right? And she's totally not understanding why things are happening. She's too far away from like the actual human nature and the human spirit, because what happens with the Sinan mostly, and first Bakal and then Strahl, or whatever his name is, is exact. I think it's Strahl. Is exactly that they are sort of trying to keep their humanity alive in that terrible situation, where there's probably no way out for them anymore. And we spoke about that in that first discussion we had, right? This idea, that image before, like at the near the end of book 2, when Onos Tulan shows them, walks them to that cliff where they hunted and like drove the herds over, and there's like that point where you can move around, where you can actually change course as a society. And I feel like when you look at something like what Bakal tries to do and Strahl does in the end, when the Sinan just walk away and so forth, is very much about keeping that human dignity that is like part of like, like, that actual like core identity of these people that they need. The ever like that entire challenge that the Vargas face overall is how to keep their like identity and dignity going, like keep that alive in the face of changing circumstances and changing time. And Sikara has given up on that. She is certainly moved with the times and with the changing times in a way, but she's lost touch with like her like identity and dignity and on the way, and that's why she doesn't understand what's happening near the end.
And she also cannot really function anymore when her society is gone. I mean, because when she and Rolata meet Draconis, I mean, her mind is gone, basically. She's gone mad. I mean, of course, you could say, yeah, obviously, she has just
Isn't that actually
lost her people. It's not surprising, but still, she's wandering around with Rolata, who is a warrior again. And Rolata is able to cope, but Sykara is not.
Did you just spoil something from the Crippled God, though? Because I think that's in the first chapters of the Crippled God, actually.
Is it?
I am almost certain.
Oh shit, yeah, if it is, I'm sorry.
So let's not go into that further.
It's Industrial Dreams.
I think it's like in the first couple of chapters of the Crippled God.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, people who are watching this discussion probably have read the whole series anyways.
True. I just realized it's like that one was I'm pretty sure that one's not in Dust of Dreams anymore. Anyway,
blended together in my head, sorry.
Which is exactly what Steven Erikson intended. Because it's one novel, right?
It just fits so well.
Yeah, of course. You're right. Let's maybe talk about the end of the Vargas storyline in Dust of Dreams and then move on to something else, because this is not the general Vargas talk, but we want to talk about other stuff as well, I guess.
It's not Vargas of Dreams.
Oh, I don't know who would be my Vargas of Dreams. Anyway, so the end of it, with Draconis just showing up and killing everyone.
Oh yeah, the grand entrance.
Yeah.
What an entrance. Whoa.
I found it super interesting because you have that final battle between the Vargas and the Acrini, and then Draconis just shows up and kills everyone. And he doesn't care whether they're like, that's I feel is the important thing. Like, he just kills everyone, whether they're Acrini defending the land or Vargas. He doesn't care about good or evil or whatever. He just shows up and kills everyone because he's a higher power. And I feel that, I mean, that's like a thing that is important in the Malazan world in general, is like the implacability of forces of nature, and the way Draconis shows up for the first time there is very much like a force of nature, not like a person.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider that he's an elder god, then technically, I mean, there is the scene in Bone Hunters when Cotillon talks to the 3 dragons, and he kind of asks that question, is the crippled god an elder god or something like that? And there's also Edgewalker around. And I'm not completely certain what the term used there is, but it's something like along the lines of the elder gods being forces of nature or being elemental forces, something like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the elder gods definitely seem to have aspects in some sort of way, or seem to represent some sort of power. Like, for example, with Mel, it's the sea, of course, and then Draconis' aspect is obviously darkness. So
see, that's the interesting thing, though. If I'm not going to go into that because maybe it's going to be explained in Carcanas. If Draconis is the elder god of darkness, what does that make Mother Dark? How does that work?
It's a spoiler.
All right, we're not going to go there. But I think it said somewhere also in probably the Dust of Dreams, actually, that the elder gods, when they showed up, and that the elder gods maybe came from outside. I think it said somewhere that they maybe came from outside of the world, basically.
You need to ask the Niflrock on that. Not me.
No, I'm 100% certain that it said somewhere when they're talking about that some of the elder gods just showed up from somewhere, no one knows from where. And some of them obviously are like personifications of forces of nature. And then there's some where you're like, well, I don't know where Karul comes from. And I think Draconis is one of those in a way. other elder gods obviously are more clear, like, Sexual Laugh, who I think is probably my favorite of those people, of those elder gods running around in the Supremes and Crippled God.
Hmm.
We need to
Yeah,
talk
but
about
as for
those
the
as well at some point.
origins of the elder gods, it's also talked a little bit more in Kakanas. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
But again,
Hmm.
there are other people or other fans who know more about that than I do.
Yeah, true. No, but I think
I've never pretended to be a lore guru. So.
I'm not. No, but I feel like that scene with like everyone like freezing, the whole battle freezing down. I think that's like another interesting thing, that in this case, darkness is very much at the same time connected with cold.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
But
just
that's
freezes
not,
everything.
it's not really new. It's been mentioned several times actually that Kurat Galain is a cold warren. And I believe once it's even said that it's colder than Umtos Felak. And that probably says a lot.
Yeah, but that's the point. Like, I'm just felt like it's nice and cool, and darkness is implacably cold. You don't build snowmen in Coral Galain, you build them in Umtus Felak. And they have tusks.
I'm not just wondering if the Taistani and the Yakut ever mixed. I mean, technically, theoretically, it should be possible, right?
I am not in that kind of business, but it's the Malazan world. And from what I've learned so far, it's like technically everyone can mix with everyone if they really try hard.
Maybe with the exception of dragons and Kichanchamal, but yeah.
That one, I don't know.
Let's not go there.
God, no.
Where there are soul taken, so not gonna say more.
Are there soul taken Kichanchamal?
No, I meant dragons with the Kichanchamal. I don't know.
Now that was wondering, are there like soul taken Kichanchamal that like Kichanchamal that can also take on another form? Because I don't think so. Wouldn't that be weird?
It would be interesting how much transformation is possible for the Kichan, because they are certainly able to change their bodies.
Yeah, they are. they are that, but that was like the other things, like why? I guess the answer is like, if you're already a sword wielding dinosaur, why would you want to turn yourself into a bear?
Because of the fluff? I don't know.
Maybe. I guess that's like the are there furry Kichanchamal? I dearly hope not.
Good.
All right, let's put this back on a more serious course here.
Yeah.
So yes, Draconis showing up is sort of like a force of nature. And I think it's interesting to have that idea that, and he is not Hood or Lord of the Dead, whoever that may be at this point. But point is, the idea is that he shows up and he doesn't care who's right or wrong. He just like takes everyone in that battle. And I feel that's sort of important there to see that. And I kind of like this time around, I kind of like that fact. It's like, yeah, but there was no like really positive way that storyline could go anyway. So why not just kill everyone? Because I feel bad for the Acronai. They were just defending. And I feel really bad for Scepter Irkolos, who's like, seems like a nice guy. But on the positive side, he would never have to worry about how to actually distribute all the gifts that Tehol sent him. So that problem has been taken away from him.
Oh god, that scene with the Acronai gift.
The Acronai gift, yeah.
It's so funny.
I loved it. I love that bit because it says so much, apart from just like the humor. it says so much about the condescension that so-called civilized people have towards so-called uncivilized people in a way. When it's like, yeah, it's just a piece of art. What do you think it was?
Oh god. But anyway, Draconis, again, I mean, if we see Draconis as a god, then obviously the gods in Malazan are not always nice, and they often don't really care about those beneath them. Yeah. And it's also, again, probably kind of a metaphor that somebody who has a lot more power than somebody else, you can't just obliterate these people just because you can. Like, I mean, as a human, you can't just, I don't know, take a lot of water and go up to an anthill and basically flood them all out. You can do that because you have more power than all of those ants. Yeah. And I mean, I guess it's a similar case with Draconis here. And it also really shows how much power he truly has, that he can just simply step out there and basically obliterate that whole army there.
Well, the interesting thing that I was asking myself there is, like, does he do it on purpose? Because like, or is it just like, does he just like step out of Dragonipur when it's broken? Because this is sort of, I feel this is like the one point where we see that like Dust of Dreams and Toll the Hounds kind of most of the time run parallel. And this is sort of the point where we see that where we're in the timeline, because at this point we don't get dates anymore in like epigraphs or like before chapters and stuff like that. My question is, like, does he just like basically fall out of the broken sword there, and he has no choice, and just because he was
basically like, kind of falls on top of them and crushes them without intending to.
That's the point. Is like, is he stepping on that anthill by accident or on purpose?
I mean, I think it's certainly possible that it was not on purpose, because, I mean, why should the first thing he does when he comes out of the sword be to kill a lot of people? Because he has no reason to. And based
maybe he's
on
just pissed off and has a headache or something.
Yeah, but based on his further actions in the books, he doesn't seem like somebody who would do that.
True. So is that just like an accident? If he could have chosen another place, he might have just gone somewhere else. Possibly. But I guess that's like the other thing that is important about Dust of Dreams, and that's going to bring like marvel at my amazing skill to change topics here. Maybe it's just an accident, and accidents just happen to people, and sometimes people die. So let's talk about the Naruk. Wasn't that like masterful? No, it wasn't. But you know what I mean. Sometimes armies are just in the way.
Actually, I don't know why. I'm just having the thought of how funny it is that Stormy and Kessler refer to each other as Mortal Sword and Shield Anvil. Yo, Mortal Sword, come over here. Like...
Yeah. Although later on they insist on being Sergeant and Corporal again.
I don't know why I had to think of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I really enjoyed was basically the humans giving back hope to the chain. And basically, I mean, it's especially interesting when you have somebody like Gurul, who has certainly a lofty opinion of himself, or
he's flying. Of course, he has a lofty opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising if you, again, it's this, like, a human might feel superior to an ant, and Gurul feels superior to humans, or a dragon might feel superior to a human. But anyway, the Kachine in general feel like they are something better, or like, what can those tiny humans even teach us? And I'm losing my voice here. I blame having to to wear a mask all the time. Anyway, what did I want to say?
Giving hope back
In
to
the end,
China.
it is the humans with their different way of thinking that managed to somehow make an impact on the Kachan and kind of kick them in the butt and say like, hey guys, you have to do it differently. And it's also, I feel like it's often the case when especially the Malazans clash with other people, or not necessarily just other races, but also other humans.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know, what are your thoughts on Stormy and Kessler and their meeting with Chine?
I mean, I personally really love Stormy and Kessler. They're some of my favorite characters in the whole book overall. Because they kind of encompass, I guess that's sort of the important thing there. Stormy and Kessler are encompass in all of their like stupid behavior and all the stuff they do. They very much encompass like the essence of humanity, right? They're good at heart. They're also pretty stupid. I mean, not like they're like not intelligent, but they do a lot of stupid stuff because that's like how we humans are, for like wrong principles and whatnot. And you have all of that, and because of like the stuff that happens to them before, they're also very much in that fight of trying to be human, right? They're still trying hard to remain human and not go full ascendant. Even though they punch other ascendants in the nose, but you know, happens to the best of us. So whom, like, that's, I guess, the interesting thing there, that the Kachan Chamal, when they get Stormy, Kessler, and Caliph is like really important there as well in that like triad, basically. The Kachan Chamal actually get like prime examples of humanity in a way. And you have that overall, like, we're coming back to that idea that the Malazan Book of the Fallen is very much about change or adapting to changing circumstances. And you have the Kachan coming back to the world and finding it changed, like very much changed, and trying to adapt. So they're taking the kind of people that are exemplifying that change in a positive way. So like they're bringing all the things that makes that are making humanity what it is, which is, you know, that strength to keep on fighting no matter what, even though like you know, against to not succumb to fatalism like certain other dark-skinned totally not elf-like people do and stuff like that. You have that once again, what you have with the Kachan, similarly to the Talani Mass. That's sort of, I feel, the interesting thing there is you have that ongoing debate between like the idea of collectivism and individualism in a way, where humans are very individual, and Kachan with their sort of almost hive mind like structure are like work in a different way. So they're kind of learning to leave that full-on collectivism behind when they talk, when Kessler and Stormy take over. It's still not perfect, but the idea, I guess, is for the Kachan to over time become less Kachan Jamal and more human in their like identity. But we don't see that yet. We just see them, you know, taking over like the that defiance, that ongoing defiance that is so much part of human identity, that like, yeah, well, we might lose, but at least we won't go down like without a fight in a way. And I guess that's sort of what we get from that. And Stormy and Kessler obviously embody that in an interesting way, both of those. And you have Khalid in the middle, who is always like, you know, the doubting kind part of that, but I feel she's like very important in that triad as well, because we always kind of keep, I feel it's easy to forget how important Khalid is for the whole thing in a way, because it's like she's always insisting on how weak she is and how like she's always in doubt and so forth. And you have Stormy and Kessler, who are larger than life and louder than life and all of that.
I feel like she's a little bit of a mediator between Stormy and Kessler and the Kachine. Obviously, first of all, because she knows more about them than they do. So she's able to give them some information about them. But she's also not, I mean, Stormy and Kessler are a lot to handle if you imagine meeting them. And their personality clashes a lot with the Kachine. And Khalid, on the other hand, is more reserved than they are. So she kind of is able to, I don't know, balance out Stormy and Kessler's intenseness, I guess.
Yeah, they're super intense. Although I feel like Stormy is sort of my spirit animal. He's sort of
yeah, I mean, he definitely has a really gentle side to him. There is one scene, I'm pretty sure it's in Crippled God, where he accidentally killed some sort of animal, or I don't remember what it was, because he tried to pick it up.
That's a memory he has either in Dust of Dreams or Crippled God, when he remembers that he tried to pick up that mouse and apparently accidentally.
Oh yeah, it was a mouse. Yeah, and he kind of grabbed it too harshly, and then it died. And he was a grown man.
Yeah, but that's I guess that's the point where he is the shield animal, because he is all emotions. He's like hard on the outside, but he's all emotions, and he can take, and he can't. I guess that's like him, like on the contrary to someone like Tanakalian, for example. He is the kind of person who takes in all outside emotions without judging. He can't help but doing it. Which makes the real shield animal, which is what Itkovian did. Although Itkovian obviously had like kind of training and stuff like that. But the idea is that he can't but help to take in other people's emotions. Whereas Tanakalian obviously is like, yeah, I need to judge. And, but you know, the whole Parish thing is a whole nother story. So I feel like the whole idea of the Kachine with Stormy and Kessler is very much about this idea that these, and I mean, you look at it, we learned about it. Are we at the point where we know who's in Dust of Dreams? We know who is actually running Collans at this point? I think we do.
Like, I think it's definitely hinted.
Am I allowed to say that word?
I'm not sure if the actual name of the group of people is mentioned, but
the point is,
I mean,
like,
it's definitely possible to guess.
But I feel like the interesting thing there is to look at it and to see that the old, like the old things are coming back for this like final battle. You see that with what they're called, obviously the Elder Gods, with Erastus and Setchel doing their dumb shit and so forth.
The Elder Races.
The Elder Races, everyone is coming back for that final battle. And it's very much about, some of them will learn to adapt, some of them will not learn to adapt or are not interested in adapting. And they are, like the Kachine are luckily on the side that is trying to adapt in a way.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the Kachine Naruk. And there's one thing that I need to mention, where I think what Niferock said in a comment to our last conversation was maybe wrong. Because he talked about like genetic engineering of the Kachine Chamal out of the Kachine Naruk. And at the end of Dust of Dreams, it is said that the Kachine Naruk, being like a more primitive version, I'm not even saying, Does it say more primitive? It says that they have degenerated further and further down. So I'm not sure if like genetic engineering actually was the point there, or it was more like them sort of being just like the result of natural evolution there. Also, I'm just trying to provoke a Niflrug comment for engagement's sake. But let's talk about the Battle of the Naruk and what happens there and why it happens and why it is interesting and powerful and still sucks.
Well, lasers and fireballs, I guess. I mean, that battle is incredibly cinematic, right? I mean, just imagining, you know, you have the sky keeps rising up into the air, and you know, blasting power and everything. You have all of these giant lizards on the battlefield.
I
just imagine that on the big screen.
Yeah, I just love the fact that like when for all the time we're like, you know, dinosaurs with swords are awesome. And then suddenly you have like dinosaurs that shoot lasers. Yeah, he could always top that.
Yeah, no, it was pretty cool from a cinematic perspective. And also, what happened with the Asath in the end? Like, you know, with the eye of the errant, and then Icarium basically creating the Asath house. I feel like that is one of these typical Erikson moments where you're sitting there and you read it and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
I mean, we know that now, like, once again, maybe there's more in the Carcana strategy that I don't know, but we know from early on that Icarium is connected to the nameless ones and who are the servants of the Azath and so forth. So Icarium has a connection to the Azath in a way.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means he can also build, like, just create houses of the Azath out of nothing. I don't know. But on the other hand, he also got through weird, like, trans-dimensional metaphysical ways one eye of an elder god. So maybe that works. I just love that. So before that, I just love the fact that it is possible to take those rooted, like, Kachine fortresses and just actually fly them around, and I'm like, that's fucking awesome. Like,
And it was also interesting when it was mentioned, like, that parts of the sky keeps are degenerated and you have all of these pipes and stuff hanging out. It almost has a little bit of a science fiction feeling to it.
It's kind of like it's basically
a spaceship. Well, I mean, it's not a spaceship, but kind of.
Well, it's a steampunk spaceship, basically. There's a space component to it, though, that gets mentioned in the Crippled God later on. Like just a little hint where someone is like, yeah, there's like memory of stars and flying through stars. So maybe they're not even just dinosaurs with lasers and fireballs, they're also space dinosaurs.
Oh god. But I mean, back to Icarium. I mean, it's pretty strongly hinted that Icarium is probably the only character that we know of that would be able to destroy an Asath. So
if you consider he's done it before.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider that, it would make sense that he would be able to also create one. And I feel it's also interesting that Gothos is, who is his dad, of course, is so linked with the Asath houses as well.
Do we actually find out who is his mother in Carcanas? Can you tell me if we find that out? Because, like,
I don't think we do.
All right.
I mean, his mom was Toblakai, if I remember correctly, right?
I don't know. Is that mentioned? I don't think it's mentioned in the Book of the Fallen. So maybe you just gave me a hint. I don't know. I'm still like, who's his mom? I mean, he's called a Jack, so he's like half Jackhood and something else.
Yeah, but I mean, when Karsa meets this Yagut lady in the tower, and she talks about the Yaks, right? And she tells him that one half of them is Yagut, and then she says, "Don't you wonder what the other half is?"
Okay,
So
yeah, so maybe.
I was under the
Appas,
impression that Ikariam is part Tublakai, and
well,
also
Appas certainly got around.
I mean, he has to be right because of Karsa, because Karsa in Reaper's Gale, when he walks up to him and he says that he sees it now, and that to me, I understood it that way, that Karsa recognized the Tublakai
it makes sense
heritage
because
in Ikariam.
Yeah, it will make sense. He's also pretty bloody stubborn, and it seems he's able to create warrens around himself, which seems to be like one of those Tublakai things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't consider that.
Oh yeah, I still feel like really like Ikariam is like the other one is like I feel so bad for Ikariam all the time.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. I also feel a certain kinship with Ikariam because I tend to go into very dangerous frenzies for me and things around myself. Not necessarily rage, but you know. And I'm very thankful for having one or two very Mappo-like friends that kind of help me to not destroy the world.
Oh, but then Mappo shows up in Dust of Dreams, right?
Yes, he does.
It is still in Dust of Dreams, yeah. I mean, when it is like when they meet the trade guide, right? And it has been Gurul who has been lifting up the carriage, but I mean, he wanted to get Gruntle, if I remember correctly.
Although that part, I think, happens in Crippled God, actually. I'm not quite sure. It's somewhere at the end of that.
Yeah. I don't know. As I said, it blended together, but
yeah, which is what Erickson wanted, right?
But I mean, I think it was before Gurul kidnapped Stormy and Kessler. So
no, it's after that.
After that.
Yeah. Pretty sure it's after that.
Anyway.
But I'm pretty sure that he's still in Dust of Dreams, because isn't that whole like Jackhood thing on that record coast also Dust of Dreams?
I don't know.
I mean, that the whole bit with when they end up at that village with those vampires and stuff like that, I think that's all. Or is that still Reaper's Gale? Because sure as hell isn't Toll the Hounds, but I'm pretty sure that's all Dust of Dreams.
I don't know. The thing is, I have already started Crippled God, so
no. Okay, so the tearing.
Maybe that's why my memories are blending together. Anyway.
Yeah.
But Mappo, oh my goodness. Speaking of characters you feel sorry for.
Yeah, I know. I know. I mean, the interesting thing with Mappo is that the Mappo Ikariam relation that they have is sort of a toxic relationship, because Mappo knows things about Ikariam that he can't ever tell, and that whole tension they have all over the place. And we're totally leaving Dust of Dreams behind here at this point. But that whole idea of him knowing things about Ikariam and what he does at the end of Deadhouse Gates, and this idea of like, who's selfish in that relationship? Is he the one who is like completely unconscious of the things he does, or is it the one who is like completely conscious of the things he does? But it is like a very powerful friendship, but nevertheless, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Mappo's relationship, or Mappo's side, is definitely unhealthy as well. If you consider that he's basically not able to live anymore without Ikariam, that he is completely dependent on that relationship and not able to function without it anymore. And I mean, that is pretty extreme and unhealthy. that basically he spends like all of his storyline after they get separated with trying to find Ikariam, because he's apparently unable to find a different cause in life. And I mean, it's not just because he was worrying for Ikariam and knew that he had to take care of him again, because obviously Taralak Ved didn't have Ikariam's best in mind, but it's not just that, it's also Mappo who cannot function himself anymore without his friend.
But I guess that's like, on the other hand, the thing is like, if you have been, and that's like the interesting bit, there's like, if you have been in some kind of like very tight, maybe toxic or whatever relationship for a long time, learning to function as an individual is super hard. It's something that, like, when you look at people that have been in a let's talk about a relation, because while Mappo and Ikariam have a friendship, so to speak, it's much more than just a friendship. It's much closer to like an actual relationship, so to speak. And you have people, like, I don't know, I know people, I have friends that have been first in a relationship, they're married and stuff like that, like the whole 9 yards. And when that is over after like a decade, it's super difficult for people to find like a life as an individual, at least for one person in that relationship. Usually not for both, but mostly it's like one person moves on, the other one tries to figure out how to move on. That is super fucking difficult. And then you like scale that up to how many centuries Mappo has been around with Ikariam. It's like, I get it. Now, obviously, Ikariam is not moving on because he wants to move on, but because he's Ikariam and he can't remember Mappo. But the problem still remains. It's like, if you have like dedicated yourself to something for a long time, moving on or changing that is super difficult. It is basically on the personal level, the same thing that the Vargas have when they try to change their society, because you've done this forever and ever, and changing something that has seeped down to be your identity is super difficult, because it means like questioning everything that happened before. And we're not good at questioning our past as people in general.
Yeah, and of course, another point here is that the relationship of Mappo and Ikariam was working. It was not like with the Vargas, for example, who couldn't continue to live like they used to on Vargas, for example. I mean, the relationship of Ikariam and Mappo was ended because somebody basically separated them. It's kind of like, it's not like if you have been arguing in a relationship and then decide at some point, okay, it's not working anymore, we need to go separate ways. It's kind of like somebody kidnapped your significant other or your best friend or whoever. So obviously, Mappo did not undergo that process that, for example, the Vargas had. And that makes it even more extreme for him to cope with that situation of being separate from Ikariam.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, Ikariam is only kidnapped. But you look at, like, I don't know, those cases where, I don't know, you live in a relationship and your partner dies through, let's say, like earlier than expected, like, through like an illness or maybe an accident or whatever, or you have parents whose children die, which is horrible. And you see how suddenly a lot of that stuff like breaks away, because that's a huge part of your identity, is that relation to that other person. So I feel that's more like the way, you're right, that's more like the way to go with like Ikariam. It's more, and Mappo, it's less like a conscious breakup. It's more like one partner dying way ahead of their time, or being kidnapped or whatever, like disappearing, that kind of thing. And yeah, of course, it's super difficult to actually get, take that away or change that. You have that not recently, like, you have, that's like the weird, you have like people that lost like loved ones through like tragedies, and you have all these cases where people then like keep their room the same way it has always been and stuff like that. We do that as people in general, and at least Mappo knows that Ikarium is still out there, so he can actively do something.
Yeah, but he also cannot say goodbye because he knows that Ikarium is somewhere, and so he cannot make his peace with his past because he knows that there's still a chance that they might reunite.
Yeah, true.
I guess so, and I mean, there's certainly, if you imagine that a loved person has disappeared and you don't know if they are dead or not, that is maybe in some ways even more difficult than knowing that they're dead.
Yeah, it's a lack of closure. That's true. All right, shall we have a quick look at our favorite Elder Gods crew? Because before we end all of this.
Yeah, we totally digressed here, right?
Yeah. So yeah, set your laugh. The Errand, Kilmandaras, and totally not male because he doesn't want to be part of it most of the time. What are your thoughts?
Can we talk about the meeting when they find out that Rake is dead?
Yeah.
I feel like that was such an interesting scene. And one thing I want to talk about is when Mel actually proposes that theory about subtlety.
Yeah, that one is really good.
Yeah, and when he says, who else is truly subtle? Draconis, or might Draconis be one of those people who are truly subtle? Because when you are truly subtle, you do something, but nobody even knows that you have done it. Yeah. And then he says, only one man ever defeated Draconis. Only one man was able to basically fulfill the destiny of Dragnipur. Only one man was able to look into the face of chaos and not blink. And that presents you with an interesting theory. What if Draconis actually, kind of engineered his own death to place the weapon in Rake's hands? I mean, we don't know what happened because we never really saw that duel, but it's certainly a super interesting possibility to consider.
Will that duel actually be in Walk in Shadow, or has all of that shit already happened? Oh,
I don't think so, because I mean, it's all pretty vague when exactly the events of Walk in Shadow, of the Kakanas trilogy happened. But in the prologue of Memories of Ice, when Draconis Cruel and Sister of Cold Nights meet because of Valor, then Draconis says that basically since the time of Elder Dark or something like that, he has been fashioning a sword. So that means that at that time, which is roughly 120,000 years before the events of the main series, Dragnipur was not finished. And I mean, I'm not quite certain when exactly Kakanas happens, but from what I understood is when Kakanas happens, that is before the ritual of Talan. Please correct me if I'm wrong here, and again, the question is, how reliable are those sources that we have about the timeline? I mean, of course, you have different calendars, you have unreliable sources and stuff like that. So, but theoretically, if we assume that Kakanas happens before the Talan ritual, then it should take Draconis a very, very, very long time until Dragnipur is actually finished. Which, I mean, I can't really imagine.
But isn't that the point when you look at the ritual, like when you look at the prologue of Memories of Ice, and during that, like that second part of the prologue, you have the first one that's like 300,000 years in the past with like live Imas. You have the second one, and in the second one, at the end of the second one, Karul meets Baljak, who is still like an eye and not a Talan eye. So at the end of that second part where Draconis is still alive, the eye have not yet become Talan eye. So that is still before the ritual of telling. I'm totally making stuff up here, but that's how I would like argue that there's still a possible. But the point is, like, you don't know either. There is no source for it.
Also, I think we need to consider that time can pass differently in different warrants.
Yeah, true.
So it's certainly possible that the timeline of the Kakanas trilogy does not fit together with the timeline of the Malazan Book of the Fallen because of warrants and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. Again, Niferog, please do your job and clarify.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, I've been digressing again. I'm so sorry.
That's perfect. So let's go back to the point where they're mourning Rake, and the idea of that whole thing being arranged, because it kind of means that Draconis can actually escape Calor's curse through the sword.
Yeah.
And I feel like one thing that is interesting there that I want to talk about is, and it might be more interesting later on in the Crippled God, but one thing that is interesting there is now we usually have that idea of, in the Malazan world, that gods are chained to their worshippers, and that chain goes in both directions, right? You have like gods have influence on their worshippers, and worshippers have influence on their gods. It's super like obvious in the case of the Crippled God, but it's like with the other like gods and worshippers, the same thing. It's like why Drake kills all her high priests and stuff like that. And what happens with the elder god of Draconis is that when he ends up in Dragnipur, for like a lot of time, he's still chained, but it goes like only one direction. The question is, does that actually teach him something about the responsibilities of being a god, in a way that being out there and being, say, the errand doesn't teach you anything, in a way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, possible. And another point I just thought about is if we consider that the power of a god is linked to worshippers as well.
Yeah.
Which we also notice with Cruel and the Errant. Isn't it interesting how much power Draconis has when he exits the sword?
Yeah, that's a lot of power.
I mean, there's also this factor of who the elder gods actually are as beings, I guess, which is technically also a Kakana spoiler, I think, but I mean, I'm not quite sure if it was ever mentioned what kind of followers Draconis had. I mean, Cruel had followers, the Errant as well. If I remember correctly,
it's never mentioned about Draconis, I can tell you that.
It's never mentioned, right?
No.
So I'm wondering if it's possible that Draconis' power is independent from worshippers, because that would explain how he can have so much power. Because if he had worshippers, then technically he should be a forgotten god by now, if you consider how long he was in Dragnipur.
But there's so one scene. There's one point in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I think it's still in Dust of Dreams. Maybe it's in Crippled God, right? I think it's still in Dust of Dreams, where it's said that Draconis showed up as consort of Mother Dark, and no one knows where he came from.
Yeah.
And I feel that's sort of the point there. It's like no one knows where he came from.
Yeah, again,
I'm pretty sure there's Karkana spoilers.
Darkness, so I'm pretty sure kind of explained there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. But I feel that kind of is like the point. There's like, Like he's sort of an outsider in a way.
Mm. Yeah, but I mean, if you look at ascendants like Rick, for example, who is not a god, his power is not dependent on worshippers. So he also doesn't lose it because he cannot lose worshippers that he doesn't really have in the first place anyway. So
yeah, because he denies his worshippers, and we still know that when he shows up somewhere, he is still like, I'm not saying he can flatten an entire army if he wants to, but he certainly has power to just, flatten a couple of people if he wants to, just by showing
sure.
up. So I guess that like the actual like point of being a god or a goddess is not that important there. It's just like, how much power do you have and how much power can you actually, put out on a point and just like use. But I feel like another thing that is like super important about that whole thing of like Draconis returning is the idea that like this is like the first point where we see that people that were caught in Dragnipur, when it breaks or is like broken, at least some of them can apparently return to the world and do stuff, even though it might just be befriending a not so smart tablet guy.
That scene is gold.
Yeah, that scene is, I love that point when it's like, it's good to have gods as friends and like no one
They
else
collect chickens.
I just love the fact that it's good to have gods as friends, and like, yeah, every believer would say that, but on the other hand, it's Ublala and he has a god as a friend.
But it also means that he knows who Bug is, right?
I think he found out later on. Yeah, of course he found out. Like, I mean, he's still in the temple later on, so he knows sort of that Bug is male.
Yeah, but then imagine, I'm just imagining if Ublala would end up bragging about knowing an elder god to somebody, and then they think, yeah, you're just totally crazy. But he's actually speaking the truth.
Well, to be fair, he probably forgot the name at this point. Yeah, but still, the other parts in that group, Kilmandara's Setchulnath and the Errand.
It's another case of people not being able to adapt, maybe, because they want their old power back. They apparently are not able to accept that the world has changed.
Well, that's like the interesting bit that I find so fascinating about Setch or Knuckles. That he's always like oscillating between, yeah, I want some power back and stuff like that, or maybe I don't want to deal with that shit anymore because my job was shitty as hell, because being god of chance, when you know that there is no such thing because shit happens whether you want it or not, sucks. Same thing as being god of death, it sucks. You don't want that job.
It would be interesting how, if you consider the Errand, he made some bad experiences with humans lately, obviously, in how far this influenced his decision to try to gain power again and have more power over humans again. Because we don't really know that much about what Setchel has been doing lately, but it seems like he wasn't as directly involved with humans letely. He doesn't. He might not have as many personal reasons as the Errand does.
I thought Setch just like got himself some kids, which were called Upon, and then just sat down there in that like Azath house under the sea, with his mom, and I don't know, waited for random Tist Edward to show up, and that's basically what he did for centuries. I don't know. But that, I guess that's sort of the point, is like he just like left all that shit behind, because you have that point when they're starting out and Erastus, the Aaron, gives him all that power, and suddenly he's like this, like
Dashing, side.
That's the point. It's like as that buff for a Forkle Assail measure of buff Forkle Assail, and then he's like, yeah, you know, I don't want that shit. I left it behind before. So yeah, like I think he just did nothing, just like sat there and just like did nothing, except like, I don't know, sleep, watch, drink tea, or whatever.
That doesn't sound too bad, actually.
Well, he still had his mom living with him, which is kind of God, you know, that's the point. Like, Setchel is the nerd ever. He lives with his mom and is playing with dice.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but he's happy because he doesn't have an internet to actually be misogynist on. But yeah, so you're right. Like, Erastus has had some like bad experiences with humans lately. And I feel that's like the interesting thing. Like, how much of that is Erastus doing like his dumb Erastus things, and how much of that is actually influenced by Featherwitch, like binding him into the cult of the errand and stuff like that, by taking his eye and so forth. Like, how much is he just doing like what he all actually wants to do, and how much of that like drive to power is actually a human drive to power that is sort of like taken over from, like, because he's still connected to Featherwitch.
Hard to say.
Well, he's still a dickhead, but you know,
yeah,
maybe I could still find some compassion.
Well, but yeah, I also really what I also found interesting were because we've been talking about the return of Draconis for quite some time. I feel like we need to mention the reactions of some other characters here as well, because I mean, Draconis made quite the impact on everybody. You have Fiddler basically puking for 5 days straight, or however long it was, and then
I've been there as well. It's called rock and roll.
Okay, everybody's favorite rock star is back in the form of Draconis, and now everybody's drunk. Okay, but anyway, then you have Ben, Quick Ben, who has quite the reaction.
That scene is so glorious when Erinic just takes a candle to light her cigar. And can I just say how much I love the fact that, like, the High Mage of the Lethery, and at this point lover of Bryce Beddick, is just smoking cigars all the time.
Yeah,
it's just so glorious. And like, she's super fascinating because you see all of that stuff from her, like, her point of view, and she's just doing stuff because she doesn't know and feels super insecure. And you have the Malazans on the other side, like Bottle and Quickban. They're like, that's hard as fuck. And when she just
when Bryce basically tells her, yeah, you're gonna talk to High Mage Quick Ben from now, and she's like, oh my god, oh shit.
There's the thing that I need to talk about. Like, so let's have a quick bit of, no pun intended, criticism of the language. So there's that point at that situation when she's like reminiscing or thinking about Quick Ben and so forth, like when she first met him and showed him like the moving dust that is obviously Talana mass in package format and all of that, and he's like, oh, fire, and she's like, yeah, it's connected to fire, tell him and so forth. So they call him Quick Ben because he's quick of thought, And then it says, and that's my problem. Like then it says, and later she thought that maybe the name Quick came because of him being quixotic. And as far as I know, quixotic is connected to Don Quixote. That and I'm like, look, I don't mind using modern language, but using a word that is connected to a fictional word that is very much tied to this planet here for a word play in your fictional world feels kind of off. Maybe I'm just too nerdy at this
Yeah,
point.
well, that's criticism on a high level, I guess.
I mean, I still appreciate.
Maybe Don Quixote does exist in the Malazan world. I mean, who knows? It might have been transported through some sort of portal, and it's actually a classic.
I need to reread to check if Sancho Panza is riding a mule or a donkey, because that might just be the connection.
If it's a mule, then
yeah.
Then we know what's up.
That we know, yeah. But anyway, I just love that point when they come into the tent and Quick Ben is like in that circle and it's like, he's trying to talk to me. And so forth. He's like, yes, I'm babbling. So what? And Eric just takes the candle to light her cigar. That's like so good.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say originally is there is a hint that there is some sort of connection between Quick Ben and Draconis.
Yes.
Which is obviously interesting if you consider that he is the Magus of High House Dark. And that it's kind of been hinted that there is some sort of connection between Ben and Darkness or the Tastandi, Kurt Galein, whatever. And now he seems to have, it's possible that he might have had some association with Draconis in the past.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to keep in mind when you're reading Forge of Darkness. And the second character that has quite the reaction to Draconis is actually Ruthan Good, another character of whom we don't really know who he is.
That's the point. Like Ruthan Good is the one character, like when people like ask me when I did like the dumb like 500 people ask me anything, whatever thing, like which like minor character would you like to know more about? And I didn't mention Ruthan Good, but that's someone I would so much love to have his backstory. Because I know he shows up in some of the Esselmont books. But I want to know the stuff that happens before, like the old stuff, because like, yeah, I wanted to know more about Ruthan Good.
And I mean, it's kind of hinted that he might be some sort of elder being, even though we don't quite know who he is. And if he actually knew Draconis at some point, that would make sense if he was an elder being.
He certainly, that's the point. It's like you have that situation. He's like, is that still Dust of Dreams, or is that already in? Ruthan Good certainly knew Draconis and talked to Draconis. We know that. And he's like, if we meet again, I'll kill you. He says that. He thinks that about Draconis. And the again there means they have met before. And as we know, Draconis has been on an educational holiday somewhere for a while. So yeah, Ruthan Good has been around for a while, and at some point he acquired a Storm Rider armor. But yeah.
Also, I need to mention that it is kind of awkward to read about a character called Ruthan by because
yeah, that's true.
Of obvious reasons.
But I totally understand that. And I get his Ruthan Good to Ruthan Bad joke. I totally get that, and I love it. But man, I just read Piranesi by Susanna Clark, and there's one character in there called Raphael. And the story is a first-person narrative by someone else. And at some point, the narrator is very much enthusiastic about Raphael and calling out to Raphael. And then reading that was like really weird for me.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
And I looked it up, and it's even written like it's even the Hebrew spelling, like with the PH and not with the like the Italian spelling with the F's. That was just weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ruth and God and Ruth and the High Fist are a problem at this point.
I mean, I always have a certain mental association whenever I read about Ruth and Good.
The point is that Ruth and God always like combs his beard with his fingers, which means you need a certain amount of beard to actually do that. Just saying.
Yeah, Ruthan bad. Can he do that?
I think we demand a show of beard combing from him.
So Ruthan, if you're watching this, you have been challenged.
Beard combing has to happen.
Oh God.
Otherwise, we have exposed him as an imposter.
Okay. Yeah, is there anything else?
Well, there's lots else, but I think we've maybe run out of like brain power at this point. So yeah, it's once again been a great time. It's been amazing to talk to you. You've helped me to understand things, and
Same. Yeah, it's always like whenever Raf is talking, it's incredible. It is incredible how much knowledge you have and about literature and history, philosophy, and you just talk about that so casually. And then I'm sitting here like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I'm not worthy to contribute anything.
That's dumb. You know way more than I do. That's the point.
No.
I'm just better at quoting stuff.
It's the Malazan fan imposter syndrome. So
on that, I think that's a good point to end it. It's been amazing. Thank you.